needed to run government became more complex and a lot larger. Another thing changed in that there was technology that helped us do those things: store, gather, analyze, and share information. Um, my department, Information Systems, was created around 40 years ago. Before that, departments kept their own information in their own books in their own way. Um, and these databases, if you want to call those books databases, were completely separate and discrete from each place. If you wanted to have copies, someone actually needed to make a copy, first by hand and then later through photocopying. Lucky for us, technology met us at the right time and allowed us to start doing different things with government. We started, by doing that, we discovered that most government data is related. It's either tied to a person, a group, or organization, or to its location. And when we start thinking about ways that information is linked, we start wanting to leverage that information from one government function to another government function. So we're not duplicating work, and we are growing in our ability to analyze true variables in our decision making. So that's why the Information Systems Department was formed. It became a technical function to make sure this data is safeguarded and stored and shared appropriately. Our mission statement reads like this: to be a trusted partner in providing technological innovation that enables departments to efficiently and effectively serve the county and its citizens. We've organized the department under 3 divisions. We have the IT support division, we have the IT programming division, and we have the Geographic Information Systems, or GIS division. They each have some overlap, but have a pretty core set of functions that make it unique to them. Let's first talk about IT support. Or maybe I should back up one thing. IT support and IT programming are internal service under our internal services fund at the county, which means any money we spend for IT support or IT programming, we have to generate revenue internally for those. So we bill the departments out for their portion of those. The Geographic Information Systems is part of the general fund and not under that same system.
You may get to this. Right now you just have this high level. Are you going to, when you go department by department, are you going to show the head count?
Yeah. Well, no, but if you have a question about that.
Yeah, so can you just tell us how it breaks down between the 3?
We have 7 people in our IT support. We have 33, or not 33, we have 15. If we count, well, yeah, we have 15 programmers. We have 4 administrative people, including myself, which I haven't included here. And we have 7 GIS. Is that right? 7? Yeah. 7 GIS employees. Hopefully that adds up to 33. I thought about actually adding those numbers there last night when I was putting this together, and then didn't. No, I'm wishing I would have. Okay, let's talk about the IT support division. It actually does 3 big functions. One, it builds, maintains, and monitors our network infrastructure and security systems, the things that keep us from being cyber attacked, the things that keep our data backed up appropriately, the things that allow one computer to talk to another computer. It also provides an email platform and our internet connection, our Wi-Fi access point networks, ton of things. Often, the support division is seen only as the most visible part of it, the help desk support. Most county employees have a lot of experience dealing with help desk because we have 4 technicians, including Brian here, who help deliver computers, repair computers, answer the phone to troubleshoot a computer, and send our computers off to a surplus sale after their useful life with us has ended. Those same technicians do other jobs too. They actually monitor our network infrastructure, and they help run these meetings, the technical portion of these meetings as well. Another thing IT support does is we manage our sort of group software type things like Microsoft Office and Oracle, and things that are just ubiquitous and used by everyone, whether they realize it or not. Instead of making departments go out and buy their own versions of these things, it makes more economic sense for us to sort of centrally control those, buy them under one contract, and then offer those out. So that's a big portion of managing our suite of softwares. That's kind of common softwares. And lastly, as I mentioned, we have help desk support staff. They processed over 8,000 help desk requests last year and do a ton of work for four guys. There are things that our department has historically done very well, and so I felt like a year ago when I assumed this position that we were generally in a place of strength. But there's a few things we knew we needed to do better. One of them is we wanted to even be better at providing help desk support. So we set a goal of a 93% customer satisfaction at the beginning of this last year. Our actual outcome was a little bit difficult to come up with because we haven't done a good job of tracking each ticketed help desk item, or we don't always get feedback, even though we always ask for feedback at the end of every, in terms of an email, at the end of every help desk. We rarely actually get feedback, positive or negative. We are looking for ways to improve that. And a couple of ways we've come up with this year, these are things we have accomplished already, is we've expanded the help desk hours, which previously was 8 to 5 to 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. We found a lot of employees come into work early, and if things weren't working, there was no one to call. That was frustrating. And typically our most common time for things to stop working is overnight. So we want to be here on site ahead of time so we would have less disruption to staff. We also, for the same reasons, kept help desk after, because some employees worked later, and we wanted to make sure they had someone they could call if they ran into a problem. We didn't expand the staff to do this. We've just juggled their schedule so that they're on a rotation. Somebody comes in early every day and somebody comes late every day. Second thing we did was we're introducing a new online help desk system. This is available 24 hours a day, whether there's somebody downstairs to answer the phone or not. People can enter in their issue. They can set an urgency level, which will affect how we respond to that. If it's something that's completely critically urgent, we can, the system will automatically contact our help desk personnel anyway. If they see an urgent item, they can deal with it from home, typically, or drive in if needed. Things like if our Spillman 911 server stopped working or something like that, something very critical that just can't be offline. We have plenty of those types of critical systems. We want to make sure those are up all the time. The other thing that this online help desk system will do is it will automatically store metrics regarding who contacted us, what they contacted us for, how fast we responded to them. And we'll be adding a survey question at the end when these things are closed, so that they, at least a one-question survey, they can give us some feedback about whether the service met their needs or not. The great thing also about this system is that if a user submits one, it always in their name, and they can go back and look at closed tickets in the past. So if they had a problem that kind of reoccurs and they couldn't remember exactly what their instructions were to fix it, perhaps they can go back and look and say, oh, okay, you told me to do this, this, and this, and that hopefully will be a better self-serve system. In parallel with this, our help desk personnel techs are using this very same system. So if you call, they will enter this information in, so every call will now be logged and stored, which will be a great help to me. The last thing, we're introducing a new computer equipment ordering application. Ordering computer equipment can be very complicated and time-consuming. There's lots of approvals that have to happen. And it's not a well-understood process, and sometimes when things need to happen fast, it can be very frustrating because you're not really sure where the holdup is. This application will not only track that, but will be visible to the customer who's ordering it. They will know exactly where the next step is. So if it's not happening fast enough, they know who to call to say, hey, wait a minute, we're still waiting for an auditor approval here. Can you look at this? They'll know. And just by presenting this in a more transparent way, it takes a lot of the guesswork out and the expectation about, wow, this really is a complex process. In the end, it will store everything about that order, and you will have it. So users will be able to, they will know how much support they will need to pay. If they want to recapitalize that piece of equipment, that will be all in front of them that they will have to approve before that order goes through.
Okay,
Another-
sorry, so just to
Go ahead.
confirm, so the anticipated outcome, so did, you ended up, those were all things that you did on goal 1 to try to, you know, get better customer satisfaction?
Right.
Did you end up actually measuring the customer
Yes,
satisfaction?
we get very few responses. We actually have kept an Excel spreadsheet on those email responses. It's more than 90%, but I'm afraid I don't feel that good about that number because we are probably getting like a 2% return on actually getting feedback. Now, there occasionally we'll get anecdotal feedback, and that's generally very positive. So I generally feel good about it, but we really want to find a better way of collecting that information back. I don't feel that confident.
So
one way or
maybe
another.
you'll get to this, but is that, what do you think your approach is gonna be next year? Do you want to focus more on these types of identified things that you believe will lead to better satisfaction? Or do you want to find a way to get more survey results and track it on a customer satisfaction basis?
That's a great question. Both. I want to do both. This online ticket, we want to make that so easy for them to answer that more will answer. You know, and I'll plead to department heads, please give us the feedback we need, because if we're going to make the system better, we need feedback. The worst thing is to just, you know, have people maybe upset or happy and then not share that with us, and we can't really make adjustments. I do meet with department heads regularly and ask them how things are going, and they tell me. And occasionally, if some customer was not satisfied, I generally hear about that pretty quickly. So yeah, I want to find a better way. We want to make it as easy as possible, but if that feedback doesn't come in, we'll just keep trying to find other ways we can track that a little bit more completely.
Thank you.
I'm open to any suggestions you might have, if you think of any. Our second goal was to improve our IT infrastructure and data backup capacity. We specifically, our anticipated outcome was to identify the cost of completely expanding our current offsite data backup and data disaster recovery system so that it would meet all of our data. So all of our data. Up until now, that hasn't been the case. We store certain critical data out there and we kind of rotated it around. But we want to have exactly day-old data always available, 100%. We've met that. We've implemented Oracle Data Guard and Exagrid data backup system, which provides a complete 2 levels of backup for all county data assets. This is kind of a huge thing, including a fully functioning recoverable off-site data repository. This whole system is over 600 terabytes in size and is state-of-the-art in terms of its data retrievability. It is continually talking to these backups, and so if a change happens all the way on our front end of our data, it is happening in 2 other places at every moment. We're also installing a new fire suppression system at our data center downstairs. We have an old Halon system, which has been, I don't know if illegal is the right word, but it doesn't meet federal compliance. It was installed back when the building was made. Halon is a dangerous gas to the ozone, and so we need to replace it with something so that if halon does go off, also halon's poisonous, so it's difficult. You don't want it mingling with any office space. So we're installing that. That is a huge thing. Our third goal in IT support is provide faster and more redundant internet connection. Before this year, we relied on a 1 gigabyte Google Fiber connection and a backup Comcast connection with 650 megabyte connection. Both those connection speeds are inadequate for the size of our users now. Particularly troublesome is its capacity to offer what we call VPN connections. These are ways it was designed really for mostly law enforcement to connect into our databases from remote locations. We could only handle a few hundred of these at one time, and the sheriff was using most of them. We'll talk about this a lot later. When COVID comes along and everybody starts working from home, it really stressed that system.
I was going to ask that. It's interesting. It was kind of like the discussion we had with the clerk auditor's department of some of their goals that turned out to be pretty serendipitous. I mean,
Yeah.
if you had set these goals as you did at the end of 2019, very quickly into COVID, these became even more urgent priorities.
Right. We'll talk more specifically, but absolutely. We refocused, certainly, but we were already working in the right direction, so it's just kind of made it more urgent. And without that, I mean, honestly, this happened overnight. We send people all home. And this new Veracity internet connection is 5 times faster and is already installed. It increased our VPN connection capacity more than 300%. I was being very conservative there. So it really opened the bandwidth for those types of connections to allow them to not slow to a crawl, which happened for a few weeks in April. It also allowed us to demote the Google Fiber connection. We didn't want to get rid of it. It's now our redundant connection. And then we have a secondary redundant connection with our Comcast. But the speed of the Comcast one, we don't really want to rely on it that for everyday stuff. But even last year, occasionally we'll have outages. Last year, Google Fiber went down in the middle of a business day. I think the clerk auditor, Amelia Powers, is in the middle of a television interview demonstrating our online marriage application, and we lost all internet connection. It wasn't anything with our system. It was Google Fiber went out in all this part of Provo. Luckily, we were able to quickly switch over to Comcast, a little bit slower, but worked. Now we're on Veracity. If something happens like that, we just quickly default over to Google Fiber as our secondary, and if something happened to that, we have a third. So that extra redundancy really protects a lot of our work functions. Not to mention our performance is so much better. This is a future goal. We had planned this goal for a future year, or we're going to do it in piecemeal. But we were able to do this goal using COVID funding, but it's already accomplished. This is actually very huge. It's weird to think that before 2007, there was no such thing as a cell phone or as a smartphone, just 2007. But since 2007, you can't go anywhere without, especially in a government facility where Wi-Fi is not just a luxury anymore, but a necessity. It is for us as workers and for citizens that come in to do work. Our Wi-Fi access point network was largely 10 years old already. It had some security issues and certainly capacity issues. We have been able to completely replace and double the number of Wi-Fi access points. So our signal strength is better, and it can handle more devices in a room at the same time. This is very big. The last thing we did in this realm is we purchased some a software product that allows us to do heat mapping for signal strength, so we can identify kind of trouble spots or dead spots and then readjust where we have these Wi-Fi access points. So that was a goal that we, just to reiterate, that we didn't actually have at the beginning of the year, but we were lucky to have a funding source to be able to do. This is a comparison of our actual adjusted budget for 2020 for just the support. Essentially, this is what it costs to run that support division, $2.147 million a year. And we are proposing an increase. A lot of that increase, almost all of it, about 90% of it, is just equipment support and maintenance for building, expanding our backup databases, and some of our software collaboration tools that the county shares with things like Microsoft Teams. We're not asking for any staffing plan changes. This is purely operating costs. That is all I have for support budget. Are there any questions about the IT support division from anyone?
Patrick, one question on this is, do you see, I know it's early on, and by the way, I just need to thank you for, I mean, not everyone following this may realize this is your first year really of doing this, and you've done a great job of jumping in and
Thank you.
really believing and being accountable with the outcome-based budgeting. So much appreciated there. On the budget here, you're saying no staffing plan change. You've invested a little bit more in the infrastructure and the equipment. Do you see as the equipment is more efficient and operating better, that could actually reduce the human demand on the support side, or at least maybe offset the growth that may have been required? Or
that's certainly true.
Okay.
That is absolutely true. The number of devices that say the tech support have doubled over the last 10 years. So I mean, that's how many every computer, every iPad that we're getting calls for, and more now, because a lot of people are working from home. So, and they're remoting into their machine here. So now all of a sudden they have two computers that could have problems. Not to mention all the security issues when you take a workforce and you have them now working from their home network on sometimes their personal machine. There's a lot of additional cyber risks that we need to manage and monitor. That, if we wouldn't have invested in these new tools to allow us to do that with less people, I would be up here asking for more people. But as it is, we haven't needed to do that.
So there is a correlation between this.
Absolutely.
As you have invested and the systems are working and they're more streamlined, there's a correlation to that in your staffing plan.
Absolutely. And more things are being automated too, which helpful, but everything that's automated also needs to be monitored.
Sure.
To make sure that's working. So unfortunately, IT support infrastructure, while works better and faster, isn't more simple. It's more complicated with more components to make things work. So I think we feel good about our staffing levels right now. We'll make some adjustments with attrition coming up, but mostly it'll be job shuffling to better probably match skills with the needed work that needs to happen rather than new hires, at least for 2021.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, our programming division, I hope they're not offended by my geek galore, but I have to tell you, they are, well, they're an interesting bunch down there, and they really enjoy their job. They enjoy their job so much that while the IT support guys have had, by and large, to stay this entire time through COVID working on site, with one exception. A lot of the programmers can and do work from home. If they have an elderly parent they're living with, they can do their work from home. They don't always have to be here. They'll periodically come in when we need them, but we're using collaboration tools like Zoom and Teams and Trello and a bunch of others that help keep our team together. There's a little bit of a danger with this, though, because when you've got a bunch of programming geeks, they're thinking about their stuff 24 hours a day. And I'm seeing stuff being posted at sometimes 2 and 3 in the morning, and I have to call them up and say, listen, you just can't be working like that. You're going to burn yourself out. And I'm like, well, I woke up and I couldn't figure something out, and I woke up and the idea came to me and I didn't want to lose it. So, you know, it's a really good energy down there. We were able to hire some temporary COVID workers, which have worked out unbelievably well. It totally exceeded our expectation. The kind of energy and enthusiasm and youth that is brought in really has revitalized a lot of things, allowed us to focus on some new products in really exciting ways. In fact, there are so many projects that we're working on in programming. It's 40 or 50 right now. I won't be able to talk about them all, so I just included some highlights. They do three things as well. They're either building applications, often from scratch, or they're integrating software, big software platforms, things like the assessor's camera system with the recorders, mapping systems, or Workday and the general ledger, or you just name it. There's a lot of integration that has to happen. And I should point out that just because you buy software off of a shelf, going back to my original point that almost all government data is integrated and we make the most of it when we leverage one system with another, it takes a lot of work from my staff to plug those systems in so that it's feeding data back and forth in a very almost invisible way, but hours and hours and hours. Often the true cost of buying software off the shelf, which I support, because a lot of times we just don't have the staff to be building everything from scratch, and it doesn't make sense to. But it often takes almost as long for us to integrate effectively something as it does to build it from scratch. We also handle a lot of web page design for and support our web pages. Here's some goals that we had come up at the beginning of 2020. We want to increase programming output. It's hard to say, okay, so you want to do that. Well, of course you want to do that, but this is our approach. We wanted to reform the programming group into a more collaborative team approach. And I gave a presentation last year about what I thought that could do. This is what it actually did. So our anticipated hope was that we would increase our output by 10% measured by lines of code. It's not the only way you could do it, but it's just the easiest way. Our actual outcome far exceeded that. Not even including our temporary COVID employees, we increased productivity more than 30% for new lines of code over the first 6 months of 2020, over the same period in 2019. If we include those temporary COVID-funded programmers of new code, keeping in mind that they're focused only on new code and not supporting old code, it's more than 55% increase of new lines of code produced. Huge, huge. And a lot of this has to do with doing things in a team and not in silos any longer. Our second goal is to improve satisfaction by being more collaborative with other departments. Again, we set this 93% or higher customer satisfaction as a goal. We have not done a very good job of getting actual metrics for this. We have a lot of anecdotal data. And to my knowledge, we've not had any negative feedback from any of our projects from 2020. So I guess that's 100%. Well, we need to figure out a better way of actually, so what we're going to probably do is conduct a formal survey at or near the end of 2020, asking departments to review what they thought how we met their expectations on those specific projects. Some of those projects that we can talk about are this online marriage application. I'm not going to go in depth here because Clerk's office did a great job of that a couple of days ago. A couple of metrics here is that they issued a lot of marriage licenses. At the point I made this slide, it was over 7,500. Total of $300,000 of gross revenue for that, which is great. And that number of licenses are really increasing, and we anticipate that that growth will continue as word gets out about how easy it is to use our application. Another project that we are proud of is our support for elections. We did a few things, and we're currently doing a few more things to be ready for this November election. We completely automated the process of taking the vote count data out of the machine that is actually counting the ballots. And we have automated that process, so once that outputs a file, we plug it in to our system, it reads those counts, and within seconds updates our web page with results. That alone let us, no county could beat us. And the elections office does just a great job. They are completely prepared. And the minute that poll is closed, they are over, which is just down the hall, hands us a drive, and 8:02, we've got results for everything counted up until that moment. And this year, this last primary election, the polls closed at 8. Otherwise, it would be at 6:02. It was fast. And even more important than being fast is being accurate. Prior to this, we actually had staff, not me, but actually elections actually had staff transcribing numbers to our webpage. And, you know, you can miss a number or switch a number with human error. That's not even an issue anymore. It completely takes the human element out. Okay, we've also digitized a lot of the handwritten election filing forms and disclosures. So that system is way less painful for both the candidate and for the staff trying to read their handwriting. And the last thing we're working on right now and just finishing up is automating what's called a cure letter process. A cure letter is a ballot that comes in that can't be counted for some reason. Maybe the signature, they forgot to sign it, or maybe the signature didn't match, or something like that. Something happened. Or maybe, well, I'm not going to say all the reasons because I don't want to be wrong, but during that process, when the elections office receives those ballots, they put them in a special pile, and then those voters are contacted by writing a cure letter, which can be an email, and says, okay, we've got this ballot, we can't count it as is, can you confirm what your intention was? This process alone takes hours for them to do. We have to match up 2 different databases to make it happen. We've completely automated this process, so now, once they get it, they can spit out an automated letter as an email right away without requiring staff hundreds and hundreds of hours, or I don't know, many hours. That figure savings is a figure generated by Roseanne, not from me. So she says it will save them approximately $5,000 each election.
You know, Patrick, I think that you used a couple of examples there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, I'll let you get through because I'm glad that there's another example from another department here, and then I've got a comment.
Great. Okay, how I spoke to the commission about this a few weeks back, so I'll just quickly highlight this. We've been working and had a great collaborative experience with the health department, particularly Eric Edwards and his nursing staff, and Aislinn. We're trying to come up with a better way and a safer way to give people what we know will be an in-demand vaccination as soon as it's available. How do you get thousands of people to get a vaccination and not stand in a long line for a long time, which is ironic, putting them more at risk than what they're trying to avoid by getting the vaccination. Well, so we created this application which allows them to control that traffic into small groups of 15-minute blocks, completely customizable by the health nursing staff depending on how many people they have there. It's a self-serve appointment scheduler. So the public contacts them, picks the time, and we tell them how many slots are available, like a movie ticket, and they reserve that. We send a verification text back to them and a reminder for them. They show up. They've already got they've already entered all their information digitally, so they don't need to bring a paper. We can say, just show us your ID so we know you're you, and we've already got all that information. We don't have to hand a lot of papers back and forth. It really speeds up the time they have to be in line, so that there isn't a lot of need to be waiting in line. In fact, during our last test, we did a test with flu shots a few weeks ago. On average, people walked in the door and walked out of the door 7 minutes later having already received their vaccination. If you've gotten vaccinations over there before, you know that that's not typically the case. That you have to fill out, it's a lot of paper outside, then you go in and you show it to somebody and they're typing in your answers, and then you go sit at another desk and you wait for the vaccine to be ready, and then they call you and you go back. You might spend a half an hour there or longer, depending on the line. This is an incredible difference. And when the federal government told the states, you need to be ready, and the state said, counties, you need to be ready, because the federal government says you need to be ready, we took that seriously, and we feel like we're more ready than any other county I know of to actually safely do this process for anyone who wants the vaccine. So we'll continue to test it with future vaccination events like flu shots. And it's also important to know that they plan on using this same scheduler for other things like check your car seat or your seat belts and that kind of stuff. So got a lot of bang for that effort. Another one is online payment portals. Everyone in the world, everyone in the county wanted to have contactless transactions starting in March. I should point out at this point that this isn't a new ask. It was coming. COVID didn't change that this was coming, but it did make us accelerate our addressing this problem. And so we have a few examples here. We'd already built, before COVID, an online credit card payment system for personal property taxes and other taxes at the treasurer's office, really making that easy for people not having to come in. They can pay from home. We're building an online automatic grammar request system for the attorney's office. This is saving a ton of time and allowing people to pay for those online with a credit card, and then we can pass the data back to them online. They don't even have to come into the office for a lot of simple requests like that. Recorder's office is another project that we worked on. We built a dashboard. I have a screenshot of that, and I think they might want to show this when they do their presentation. This is a screenshot of a bunch of performance metrics that are live data graphics that they can watch to see how their productivity is and what the customer demand is on a day-to-day and over a month and over a quarter. And these are all clickable graphs, and they can dig right into the data. This isn't completely, we had something like this before, but this is really expanded. So that's a good project. Again, I could mention so many others. I will not. And although I probably have a few programmers and maybe a few departments disappointed that we didn't highlight some of them, but in the effort of time, we'll just kind of get to this. Our adjusted 2020 budget was $2.3 million for programming. Most of that cost is actually paying programmers' salaries as opposed to the support, which is mostly hardware, software support. In 2021, we are asking for a bit of an expansion there. We are asking for a new integration engineer position. We're actually asking for that this year, but it will impact next year's budget, so I thought I would throw it up there now. Specifically, this person we hope will well, we don't hope, this is what we're planning to do with this position, to better integrate Workday with our general ledger and our new budgeting system, Questica. Workday is a great platform, Questica is a great platform. We of course feel very strongly about our finance system. Getting those three to talk together better will streamline a lot of processes. I actually have 2 programmers since April 1st who have spent 400 hours processing payroll because the appropriate rules don't exist inherently in Workday. And so the data output out of Workday doesn't quite match up with our general ledger system. This is sort of a failure of integration of that system of Workday when it was implemented. It was a very complex project, and we got done what we could get done, but more work needs to be done to use Workday for what its capabilities really are. And I really don't want to be spending $90,000 a year of my programming time supporting something that really should be automated from the outset. So that, while we're talking about spending $150,000, we're going to get a lot of bang for that buck, and we're going to offset already $90,000 of wasted programmer time, as far as I'm concerned, and get them actually programming instead of doing data management. Anyway, so there's that.
So,
Can I ask a quick question,
Yep.
a clarification on that? Now, my understanding is that also we are paying a consultant
That's right.
on the Workday side.
That's
and
right.
so this will also offset some of that, is that not correct?
That's right. What I would recommend is that we've already hired a consultant for the next year. That we have that consultant pair program with this new programmer, so we wean ourselves off from having to need to spend $100,000 a year on a consultant. If you add that $100,000 a year plus the $90,000 a year I'm spending on keeping my programmers monitoring just payroll, you're already going to see savings in 2022. If we don't do it, then we're just going to keep paying this up front over and over again, and that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me.
so a couple of things that I want to point out is, so what's interesting about your budget here is, again, the increases and really the whole budget is not so much just your department,
Sorry.
but this also represents what the demand would be from the various departments and what programming projects they have
Right.
for 2021, correct?
Exactly.
And so, and I want to take a step back. I feel like a couple of years ago, there was not this amount of excitement happening. I mean, one, I think there was a sense that, okay, we can't ask for money to invest in these technology projects.
Yep.
And the other was, do we have the capability to really do that?
Right.
And, you know, one of our department heads recently said, right, if you haven't innovated, then you're not saving taxpayer dollars.
That's correct.
And I think you just showed a number of examples. Now, we don't think it's not easy. People can't just start building things. In fact, we have a couple of examples of that in our longer history of people just buying software, and it hasn't necessarily shown more productivity. It hasn't shown that either we need less staff or we can grow at a slower rate on the staff. But these are all great examples of where, and this is why we're doing outcome-based budgeting, is people can ask for technology spend if they can show that it's going to help achieve an outcome.
Right.
That's either going to make your department way more productive, it's going to allow fewer people to do the work, better service to our residents, and you've shown that not only your department is facilitating that outcome, but those departments who invested are achieving that outcome.
If you go back to our original mission statement, the first sentence says, we want to be a trusted partner in innovation. We recognize we can come up with lots of cool ideas, but we can't do them by ourselves. It requires us to have a project because we get paid from departments for doing projects. If we don't have a trust from them to say, wow, I think you can help me here, then we can't get anywhere. And so little by little, over the last few years, I think we've developed enough critical mass of success stories. And hopefully presentations like this show more, give more light to some of those success stories. That we're already to the point where, we have to tell new requests, hey, wait a minute, get in line. We'll try to get there as fast as we can, especially during COVID. That has been the case. Believe me, elections would like us to do like 6 more projects before November, which of course we can't do. And a lot of other departments like that too. We appreciate that reciprocated trust, but we don't take it lightly. We know we're only as good as our last project. And as soon as we have a bad one that turns out bad, we're gonna need to do some repair work to that trust. But that, everything in our department, we have to trust each other as a staff, but we have to make sure other departments trust that we can actually be helpful to them and not just cost them money, because otherwise I'm sending invoices every month. And you can imagine, just like any bill, those aren't always that well received.
Well, but not only that, if that were the case, if a department head did start to have a proactive thought
Yeah.
of how can we innovate, how can we improve our department, if we don't have the resources that quickly say it'll never work.
That's right.
But what I like is that you're creating this ammunition just with this presentation so that they're all on notice that, no, we do have the resources. And so we do expect department heads to be thinking that way
Right.
because your team is ready to assist, to help. So thanks.
Well, I have to tell you, when I say Geek School Art, we love this stuff. This is the stuff we love. So it's fun. The last item here that represents the increase I'm asking for, we had $25,000 last year, at least in our adjusted budget, for time-limited programming employees. Then COVID happened, and we spent a lot more money using COVID dollars to meet some of these, like that vaccine scheduler is almost completely built by time-limited employees. It's overseen by our full-time staff, but it was actually the work of the guys in the trenches of our time limited. We've had such great success with that. We are next to 2 world-class universities with great IT and programming programs. A lot of these programmers aren't going to come work from us when they graduate because they can go get a higher paying job. We can grab some of that talent while they're still in school and give them a flexible schedule and use their energy and their enthusiasm and their sort of modern take and use them right away. We are surprised at how useful they are the minute they sit down. So I would like to just every year have about $100,000 to have 2 to 3 of these, just sort of as mercenary programmers. It's a great deal for them. They're getting great job experience, building their own resume, and it's a great deal for us because we get work right away. And occasionally, we might identify 1 or 2 who are superstars that we can try to entice to stay on our staff. Because I have to look at our skill set as a basket. And we can never be satisfied with the skill set that we have. So we have 2 options. We train, which we do, and we bring in new talent. And this is one way we can meet both those. So that's that. When you add those 2 together, it represents almost all of that increase. Any questions about programming? I'm going longer than I thought, but we're nearing.
I appreciate, Patrick, I just wanted to say I appreciate the work and the improved product that's coming from your department.
Thank you, Commissioner. And just know, I am not afraid to take criticism. Just call me directly, and I'm happy to talk at any time about anything that anyone in the county feels we could be doing better, because those are data points for us. Okay, GIS division, this is our Geographic Information Systems. They build and maintain mapping data. They develop mapping applications, and they add what we call spatial intelligence and spatial analysis capabilities to our existing data sets that aren't traditionally thought of as mapping data. How do we do that? Well, the subtitle under GIS is when location matters. If the location of a piece of data, not where it is in a computer, But does it represent a person with an address? Does it represent a business? Does it represent a set of data from a particular municipality or an at-risk geologic hazard like landslides or floodplains? If location matters, then this is the purview of the GIS division. Of course, I'm partial to the GIS division because this was my career for 20 years here. So I saved the best for last. The GIS division, I believe, has had a very good reputation for a very long time among among other departments, those that use us. But some might not know ways the GIS division can or has helped them. One of our goals is to keep our GIS mapping servers and web services, the stuff that actually makes like our online parcel map work, always operational, always on. So our standard goal is 99% of business hours, it is on and functioning. Our actual outcome was better than that. It's around 99.5. That represents about a day and a quarter of business time. It was down over the last 250 business days, which is how many business days there are if you don't count weekends or holidays. So we've met that metric. We will probably set a higher goal as we continue along. In the IT world, we call this the rule of nines. The more nines you can put after 99, the more you can brag. And so we would like to get to 99.999 eventually. Our second goal was to extend GIS functions or mapping and analysis capabilities throughout all county departments, even the ones who never thought they have any use for it. They'd be surprised. So as a just general goal, I mean, this is sort of an open-ended goal, but it will probably be one that will always be there until we completely have converted every nation, tongue, and people. So the goal, the metric we set up was we wanted to build 10 new GIS applications or information dashboards for county departments. I have to tell you, it's probably because I left, but Darren Slight, who's taken over as GIS manager, hired a few new people. They are just on fire. To date, they've already completed 42 new applications and dashboards this year alone. So I don't know. I think we're going to have to be a little more aggressive on our goal setting next time. Here's a couple, and since there's 42, we won't have time to talk about it. Here's a few examples. Mosquito abatement relies on our mobile applications as they go out in the field to treat mosquito larvae in standing water or in their spray trucks. We've built an application that allows them to go out with their iPad, they load it in their truck, or if they're out testing, they're just carrying it along. They test for mosquitoes and then they treat those standing water, and they track their treatments and what their findings were in terms of how much larvae they see and that kind of stuff. And the date, and we keep track, and we've done this for years. Well, they've completely rebuilt the system because technology is always changing, and the software platform we had built it on was no longer supported. So we had to, we have to do this every 4 to 5 years anyway, and it's about that time. So they rebuilt the entire thing. One of the new features is it actually tracks how long a technician was at a certain point, and it helps them track how much the treatment time took, or even how much chemicals they had to use. All this data is transmitted back to our databases in real time. So supervisors can see exactly where all their technicians are. They can look at a map, all the spots they've treated already this year, or when the last time they've been there, what the results were. Elections, we talked about this already, but the elections results map, the actual results page is a GIS map. And it's a clickable map, and extremely easy and effective way of communicating the results of an election. That is at the end point of our automation process. So we worked with the programming staff and our database administrators work with GIS as brackets on that system. Another application they made was this Dropbox tracking application, where we track when ballots were picked up, how close are they to the office, and when they get here, so that we keep an audit trail of exactly when these things are happening in real time, so we can see when we can anticipate them to make it to the ballot center. Here's an example of our online election results from last fall. Every election is different, and so you have different kind of candidates and different kind of races. But this is similar to the type of map you could expect to show our results in a few weeks. This is a screenshot of our Dropbox application. You can see those glowing spots up there are all the many Dropboxes that were there for last fall. I didn't get a screenshot for this year yet, but the functionality is similar. Basically shows when Dropboxes were picked up and which ones are still being traveled to and how many we haven't picked up yet. Next goal GIS had is to extend, well, we already said the goal, but these are outcomes, continued outcomes. We built a whole set of tools for many different departments. I'm just going to show the assessor's office here. An equity analysis application, Board of Equalization support application, and a sales comparison application. Here's a screenshot of the actual web page that the assessor's office uses to kick off these different applications. These are used by their appraisers and their assessment modeling staff. Here's an example of our permitting, one of the screenshots from our permitting application that tracks new permits, residential and commercial, and where they're occurring. You can see there's also a map view of this. Here's another application that compares sales. Now, sales is not a public, it's a private, we don't release this part to the public because of Utah state laws, but the assessment staff, when they're doing comparisons, need to see where those sales were and how much they were in the proper time frame, and they have a whole bunch of criteria you can kind of see with bullet points on the left side. So a house is compared as closely as it can, apples to apples. You know, the right year range, the right square footage, how big the lot is, all that kind of stuff. So they can fine-tune their query, and they can find a source, and they can say, okay, show me all of these sales in this area in the last 6 months or 12 months that meet these parameters within these tolerances, so they can see other sales. So when they go to BOE, they can say, oh, well, we've had these other sales just 2 blocks away, and it was this much. So they can defend or adjust appropriately assessed value. The IT GIS budget is not changing very much at all. 1.16 million for 2020. We do ask for a slight increase because we would like to upgrade one of our GIS analyst positions to a GIS programmer level. There's more work in designing customized applications than we have programmers to do, even in the GIS side. Those applications you just saw, those are all programmed applications. They're not like off-the-shelf applications. So the demand for those are going through the roof, and we need more help with that. So we're not actually asking for a new staff member, just upgrading a staff position. And I believe we talked about that back in April in a work session. That is kind of, let me just say a couple of things quickly about COVID. It is somewhat of the elephant in the room. COVID, of course, affected all of us. It especially affected the computer department because of the role we play.
Patrick, I'm sorry. Just on GIS, I didn't realize you were transitioning
Oh, no,
back into
it's
your
fine.
whole
Go ahead.
department.
Sorry, I should have asked.
No, one thing on GIS. Can you I appreciate all the insight on the new projects,
Mhm.
but could you just take a minute on what are the most heavily utilized
Okay.
applications
Right.
just for the public of the GIS department?
Probably the most critical function GIS actually does, there's two. We support all the mapping layers that appear in the E911 dispatch center. That data doesn't come from anywhere else. It comes from us. So it means addressing and street names and all that kind of stuff. We have to be absolutely vigilant. Otherwise, an ambulance or a police will go to the wrong place. And that's happened in this valley with other 911 systems. And we knock on wood that it never happens. A lot of times, though, you think about it, this is a growing county. So there's constantly new roads and new addresses. And now there's a tendency for developers to be building subdivisions before they're fully recorded. So we are constantly watching for new addresses to show up. It's critical. That function alone weighs heavily on us because the stakes are so high. Another function that's very critical is our entire land management system, which starts with the recording, then the whole mapping platform to draw in the parcel boundaries. That starts in the recorder's office. They rely on GIS to build that management tool and to manage that data out of the recorder's office and hand it off to the assessor's office, which then does their assessment modeling. That system alone, we call the land system, is huge and extremely complicated and integrated, and frankly, the envy of the state and the Intermountain West. No one has a system built like that has workflows automated, and the recorder's office can speak to the value of that. So we're a huge industry leader. I will just mention, but I won't want to dwell on it because I don't want to take anything away from our GIS people. But they have won an international award this summer, and what we'll do is probably present that award in an upcoming work session, and I'll want to have their whole staff here because they deserve it. So that land system is probably a huge thing. Now, the most visible thing that the public will know is we have a very popular online and mobile parcel property search tool that is used by realtors and delivery people. We know when the system is down, that 99, one of the reasons why we can keep that at 99, because when that goes down and our online parcel search stops working, we get lots of calls. I mean, it's a lot of calls. It is great. So that's probably the most visible thing for the public to see. And that is a free download, by the way. If you search for Utah County Parcels, you can download it either for a Google, an Android or iOS app. No. Oh, there's a little plug for you. Right? And that, by the way, we just rebuilt again with better technology, so it's performing even better with more functionality than it ever has. So those are some of the main things, but there's a lot. So thank you for asking that question. Did I miss anything big, Darren? Mhm. Okay, like I said, COVID did impact us. These specific ways, but in many other ways. Nearly immediately, the third week in March, the first week of April, offices across the state were closed. Economies were downsized and shut down. 72%, to this day, even now, 72% of administrative positions that work here in this campus, between this building and the courthouse, are working either most of the time or at least half of the time from home. This, as I mentioned before, seriously tested our capacity to extend these services to allow people to work from home safely and quickly and in a way that wasn't testing our security. We were able to meet that demand. Yeah, we had a few minor growing pains, but I think for the most part, users did not see any adverse effect other than having to deal with their kids under their feet while they're trying to do work. Our side held up. As I mentioned, also, a lot of these more remote working, more contactless transactions, people don't want to come into county offices and conduct business, especially people younger than 35. They don't want to come in here. They would rather go to a website and get what they need and never walk in through the door. That was a paradigm that had been switching for a while. In April, it became a necessity that we convert as many of these as we can, as fast as we can, and we're still working on it. So that's why I put that in red. It just accelerated a trend that was already there. Luckily, we had set certain things in motion earlier in the year that we were able to meet those needs. It did require us to reevaluate our goals and focus. We had to move some of our priorities around to deal with the fires, but because our goals were already leaning this direction, we did not have to reinvent or make new ones. We just had to maybe change some of the order. Some of these projects that we had hoped to be done already by now just haven't been able to be finished because we're working on more pressing items. I want to point out that we're a government, and the government and technology sometimes rightly earns the reputation for being a slow innovator and slow adopter. The private sector, they need to make a profit. They need to be efficient. They don't have a choice, or they will be out of business. They have a customer base. The fact of the matter is, we have the same customer base. People who are using their services are also using ours. And if we allow too much disparity between our innovation and what's actually happening in the real world, people will quickly become frustrated that we aren't providing the same types of services in the same type of way that private sector is. It's not quite fair, I know, but it is. It's just we have to try our best to meet those constantly evolving customer expectations. It is an opportunity to innovate, to use technology. It is. And we're always weighing, is it worth it now? Is now the time? And we always have our ear to the rail. What's coming that's going to make our jobs easier, more automated, and more efficient so we can do more of these projects for the county. But we have to be careful. We can't do all of them all at once, and you don't want to be chasing your tail with every new thing that comes down the road until we can actually use it. However, we shouldn't accept the status quo with the customer experience. If we let any of our great successes sit there untouched for too long, they will become old and stale, dated, and less useful. So we can learn from the private sector as we go along. We've done that several places. There have been places where we've even led, like online marriage. We actually cobbled together technologies that even the private sector hadn't done. And that is an amazing thing. We can't do that all the time, though, because we have jobs to keep working on. But it is great when we can do it. Just kind of in conclusion, instead of being scared of the inevitable change that is always happening and seem to be accelerating, we need to find ways of using that to our advantage. Back when I showed you the first few slides of those old ledger books, things didn't change that fast. And you could plan for change as they were coming. When photocopier machines came, it changed a lot of things, right? You didn't need to transcribe a bunch of stuff. But it wasn't that rapid of a change. You had time to prepare for changes like that. We don't really have time. And if this year taught us anything, we need to expect what we call in the IT world disruptions, which are sometimes negative and sometimes positive. The advent of the iPhone is a disruption. It changed the way of doing business. It's a positive thing, but it changed the way of doing business. COVID, it disrupted a lot of things. If we are trying our best to stay in touch with those changes and anticipate them when we can, we will be better positioned to actually use them to our advantage. And I think that's the last slide I have. Any questions or comments you might have for us?
No, thank you. That's great.
Sorry, I expected that to be, well, I said 60 to 90 minutes, so we did. Great. Thank you very much. That is all I have.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Patrick. As we will begin to transition into another budget work session on human resources. Alice, are we just gonna continue rolling this? Okay, all right, so good, it's fine. We're recording, so Ralph, we're still live, and we are just going to jump right in. And I will turn the time over to Ralph Barnes from our Human Resources Department.
Great.
Okay, Ralph Barnes, Human Resources. I have two primary objectives today. The first one is to cover the HR report year to date. The second one is to give an overview and a recommendation of county-wide pay plan actions. So essentially, two different sections or presentations, but we'll jump right into the HR department. So this is kind of our framework for a visual of our department. We're definitely outcome-based. We base our processes on being extremely responsive, having a certain level of expertise, and being in alignment with the strategy of the county. And upon that, you would find, what do employees get in return for coming to work at Utah County? What is total compensation? That's both intrinsic and extrinsic. Then we have the functional areas where we have all of our processes and functional areas that again are in support of the outcomes. We do feel like we try to adhere to this model for the most part, and again, what I say to my team over and over again is responsiveness. One of our goals as a department is to respond in one day to any request. And if we cannot, it has to be within 24 hours, and we've hit that goal about 95% of the time. So it's not always having the answer, but it's just being responsive. Okay, our mission statement, again, I highlighted responsiveness. Our department supports the county by attracting, retaining, and developing our most important asset, our people. We wouldn't be here without our people. Build on the foundation of responsiveness, expertise, and strategy alignment. Our mission is to create organizational value while maintaining fairness and consistency in the application of policy. Utilizing the most current best practices in human resources, we strive to select and develop employees with the attitudes and competencies required to achieve successful organizational outcomes. So I do feel strongly, passionately about the effective HR can have on an organization, and we really do strive to make a difference. We want to be seen as that HR department who is solution-oriented and not one that gets in the way. My experience in working in organizations is HR is sometimes seen as, we don't want to go to HR. We need to stay away from HR. They just get in the way. They cause problems. That's not what we're all about. We're about, providing solutions and helping each one of the departments achieve their goals. Super important, and that's something that our team has really worked on. At the end of the day, though, if you want to succinctly state what is HR is trying to do, we're trying to create an environment and support within the county happy, engaged, and hopefully productive employees. Very simply stated, but super hard to obtain. We want this, we try for this. When you think about all your employees, how hard is it to make sure your employees are happy? And it's a big undertaking, but there are things we can do and tools that can be utilized. Just an overview of what we do. We recruit and retain qualified individuals. We provide, the comp, pay, benefits plans. We pay employees. For some reason, that's really important, that we pay employees every 2 weeks. They really, really like that part. And our office has done an amazing job with that. Having, payroll in-house has a lot of advantages. We are able to, provide the support that our employees need and the feedback and the service that employees expect. Performance management is a big deal. We're really trying to help our supervisors and managers be more effective at managing their employees, both on the positive side and on the negative side. We are in control of a lot of data, employee data. It's very important that data is kept secure and that it's accurate. So we're constantly working on that. A lot of that, of course, is held in the Workday system. We also get the pleasure of administering our policies and procedures. Sometimes this is this kind of is a necessary evil sometimes, because we do have to apply policy as fairly and consistently as possible. This last year has been a huge challenge because of COVID. We've had an infinite variety of scenarios that have come across our desks with our employees and different cases they've had with themselves or their families or their loved ones. And how do we handle those? So we've had to rewrite some policies. We've had to be very flexible and adaptive to make sure we take care of that. We take training and development very seriously. This had been mentioned in previous presentations, how the county as a whole has sort of lacked on this previously. We're trying to make this a critical part of the culture, I think, and I think a lot of us would agree that this is essential to the success of the county going forward and being able to raise the bar as far as levels of performance. We do a fair amount of investigations and employee relations recommendations for supervisors. This is a large organization, 1,200 some odd employees, and with that comes situations of conduct, performance, where supervisors need advice and support, and we do step in and help with investigations, and then of course make recommendations. We are, this is a big push this year and going forward, is to actually measure and improve engagement, which hopefully will lead to higher levels of overall productivity. And hopefully we're supporting in a safe and an environment where wellness is very important. Okay, who do we serve? We serve 14 departments, almost 1,000 employees who have benefits, 320 time-limited employees, 50 seasonal employees, and ultimately I impart to our staff that we are serving Utah County residents by providing the people who provide the services to the county. So it's that line of sight thing. What do we really do? We serve Utah County at the end of the day. If you look at our staff, we have a fairly efficient staff when you look at workload. We have one HR staff to 114 employees. If you look at other counties, the average is about 1 to 90, and the industry standard across the country is about 1 to 72. So I do believe strongly that leveraging technology and continually working on improving our processes allows us to have a higher staff to HR staff to employee ratio. Of course, we will reach eventually a tipping point where we will need to add additional staff. I don't think we're there. I think we can still handle the amount of workload we're getting, which is significant. Any questions? Nothing from the peanut gallery? Thanks. This is our team, 12 employees. We, of course, have myself, we have our administrative associate, we have a benefits and engagement team, we have a talent management team, which also includes employee relations, investigations, business partnering, and compensation management, which also includes, payroll. So there's a lot going on here, and I'll get into that. So this is essentially our staff in a nutshell. And we do serve, again, the entire county. These are some of the other functional areas that we cover that aren't necessarily always thought about as an HR functional area, but we do investigations and employee relations, performance management, labor law and compliance, training and development, and HRS and employee records. I do want to say that our staff is consistently being trained on labor law and policy compliance. We always want to be up to date on that because we do not want to get in trouble. Start with talent management. I just want to give a visual here. Turnover has been on the decline since last year. Now you could make the argument that some of that is related to the pandemic, which I'm sure that it certainly is. But I also want to believe that we have done things in our office as far as selection of qualified candidates and supporting those new employees and supporting our supervisors to help reduce turnover. So that's something that we'll always focus on, and I hope to continue to see, downward trend. Now, with that being said, there always is sort of a positive amount of turnover. You don't ever want to be zero because there's employees that need to move on, and there's, performance issues from time to time.
Sorry, can we go back a little
Yeah.
bit? So the turnover, and what's your general view on turnover? Like when you think of goals, because I know this can kind of go both ways.
Mhm.
Just give us, because I know you're not necessarily showing this as an outcome, but it's helpful to get the perspective there.
So there is definitely a cost to turnover. If you go to the literature, it's at least, $5,000 a time, and it can be as high as the annual salary of an employee, depending upon their level. So there can be significant costs with having someone quit and having to replace them. I didn't even, get into that, and the reason being is there's also savings with turnover because you have an open position, and departments are made to just do with what they have. Now that does hurt outcomes. It hurts service. It hurts quality. So generally speaking, a certain level of turnover is healthy. Now we're currently at 8.9%, which is actually really good for the county overall for our employees who are merited. And I wouldn't think we'd want to go less than 7 or 8, quite honestly. So again, there's
And is there any part of this that kind of isolates voluntary versus involuntary?
Yeah, we do, track that, and I have that a little bit later in the slide. But and I don't have it as a percentage; I have it as a raw number. But about 25 of our terminations over the last year and a half have been employees who have been in progressive discipline. And so the idea behind that, which, and I'm not saying this is something that we'd go around and say, wow, this is a great accomplishment, but we have been able to move out employees who are either not a good fit, not performing, or have issues with conduct. And I believe that's super important. And I think it helps morale across the county. I think it helps say to those employees who are doing their jobs, we care, and we're not going to allow these employees who are bad apples to continue to work here. So overall, like you had just mentioned, the involuntary, turnovers are seen as a good thing in my opinion. And it is something we're working on to and again, we're not out to get anybody by any means, but we are helping supervisors identify those employees with issues, ideally helping them, get back to where they need to be, because that's what we really want, because we've invested in these people, we've hired them, we've trained them. But without a doubt, there are cases where the employee just needs to go. And that's what we're working on. So even though
I really appreciate that perspective that you bring. I think that's important for our morale, but I think it's also, the public being stakeholders really in the county and taxpayers. I think there's an inclination to overweight either side of this, right? That, okay, we constantly are saying, let's give employees pay raises. Or a mentality of, let's just fire, there's a bunch of horrible non-performing workers. but probably the healthiest culture is where there is both. We're never going to get 100%. I think most organizations don't really strive for 100%. There's going to be people that's not the right fit. They end up not performing. And so to believe that you're never managing anyone out or you're never hoping for some attrition, I think would be naive. And at the same time, like you're saying, that also sends a message of, hey, if you're not a fit, if you're not keeping up to, performance, there's the door. But also, if you do, there are rewards, and this is a good place to be.
Right.
And I appreciate that you've been mindful of both, and that you've helped our departments kind of see that they can manage both ways.
Thanks. Yeah, it's definitely a balance, and it's a lot of work, but it's the right thing to do. So just a little bit more on talent. Some of the goals for this year were to improve the hiring process, increase workday utilization, and eliminate a lot of the paper in our processes. We're hoping to get down to the point, and we're very close on the applications where there is no paper. We'll never get away from the I-9 completely, but most of the paper processes have been eliminated, and we can hire someone almost entirely in Workday with all the paperwork being electronic. This last year's been super busy. It's funny, when we first got into the pandemic, I was concerned that talent wouldn't have enough work. It's been exactly the opposite. All of our work, if you look at the actual work functions, they're significantly up year over year. We've posted 160 positions. We've received over 7,000 applications. Applicants per job have increased significantly, as has the quality of the applicant. Now, again, you can relate this to the pandemic. Also, again, I'd like to hope that we've done some things to increase that as well. The total hires is up significantly, and the time to hire is down significantly. Now, something just to mention here is that both poll and COVID workers, we have accelerated the hiring process significantly, and we've put processes into place where we can hire someone as fast as 3 days. Now, as you see, the average time to hire is 32 days. That's pushed up by your bigger jobs that require more recruitment, that require full.
Just to clarify that one, can you remind me, what is the actual start and end point for the way you measure it?
Yeah, so the start point is the day that we get the approved requisition. And then the end point is the day they get an offer letter. So as soon as it's approved to be posted, that's the start date. So you could just say, the posting date's the start date. And then because we really try to post the same day we get the approved requisition. So that's the time frame.
And what do I'm curious, you mentioned maybe, pandemic and the job market has a natural way of driving more applicants.
Mhm.
But you're also saying hopefully your department, what have you done that you think maybe also contributes to that?
Yeah, we have expanded our advertising reach. We're on LinkedIn, and we're on some other websites that reach out to all the universities. We do some active recruiting where we go online to certain sites to try to target people and send out, hey, I think you're a good fit, apply for this job. So really, it's more about the advertising. We're just trying to bring in more, diverse, group of applicants. And we saw an increase in the applicants even prior to COVID, but there's definitely been a jump.
What would be really interesting for that is if you could also, this is hard, it's not pure data, but a qualitative measure. Because I know oftentimes you can get inundated with
Yeah.
unqualified applicants.
No, that's so important, and it's something we do want to measure. It is hard to do. You can do it. It usually requires selecting someone and doing surveys throughout the year, their first year with the supervisor, to identify they really were a quality hire. But it can be done.
I'm not even saying quality hire, but applicants, right? So that
Oh, you're right.
you can screen out,
Yeah.
especially with some of these web services, and you and I have talked about this, sometimes you get candidates that are not even close to meeting the criteria and are not going to be interviewable.
Yeah, that's pretty much Indeed, and Indeed does bring in flocks of people, and we've gotten some great people through Indeed, but it brings in a lot of garbage too. That's the worst example where we get a lot
So to
of
monitor the number of qualified positions, that would be interesting.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting, we actually have started measuring that very thing. The recruiters have worked on that, and we actually have a spreadsheet. I just haven't quantified it yet. So we are working on that. Again, I mentioned the turnover rate is actually really good right now. In this industry, it's usually industry, in the, government sector, it's usually around, 15%, 15%, we're at 8.9. And, part-timers, there's just they're, naturally higher because this isn't their primary job. The separation of DDAP was actually a huge amount of work for our department that didn't get a lot of attention, but it was basically removing 120 employees from our, payroll and all of our systems, and we hope to think that went smoothly. I know there was a few, hiccups, but that was a big deal. For compensation, some of the goals were the implementation of, the pay factor software. We began working on the market, study this year, and we've updated a little more than a third of our job descriptions, which you may think, well, that's not that much, but it's a lot of work to update a job description. So in all the jobs I worked in HR, I swear they've never been updated fully in any company I've worked for ever. So we're hoping to get to at least like 90%. And the reason why they're never updated is because they change. They change all the time. So but we've done a ton of work on that. And it takes about, I think we figured it was about, how many hours to update a job description and price it? Was it?
Well, if it's a brand new job or significant changes, it's about 40 hours
Yeah.
to
It's
update
about-
the job description and price it.
So it's a big job. We've done a lot of work there. A lot of workday actions by compensation, creating positions, and this has to do with a lot of the active hiring we've done this year. We process a ton of compensation actions throughout the year. Pay factors we started using at the beginning of this year. That's been an effective but challenging rollout as we've brought in all the survey data to do an analysis of how we look in the market. That was one of the things we asked for last year, and it's been great so far. We completed phase 1 of the comp study for 2021. Participated in a lot of surveys ourselves because it's kind of a sharing thing. We send out surveys, we get surveys back because we want to have the most accurate and vast amount of survey data as possible. We put in a process to eliminate any errors in any type of pay action. It's basically a primary, secondary, tertiary check where we get 3 sets of eyes on every comp change. And this has been very effective, resulting in an error rate of 0. So pretty happy about that. Point
I
fact.
don't know if that is the time, but I know that is one of your outcomes or are you going to talk about W-2 compliance at all?
I left it off because it's done.
It's done.
but
Really,
it's-
is 2021 going to be the measurement year, or when the 2020 W-2s go out? Is that going to be the year that you're measuring your new compliance procedure?
So we actually were able to measure it for the 2019 W-2s because we had all the corrections in place by the end of 2019. And of course, the 2017 W-2s were the issue. And this was something that came to us, of course, later. We didn't know because it was part of the transition from HR. And that's been fully rectified, and we have processes in place again. So, short story, 2019 was 100% accurate. And we expect with no errors going forward, ever, because we do have significant processes in place. And I do want to say, just reiterate, it wasn't a problem with staff or workday. It really was the way it was rolled out. At the timing it was rolled out, the fourth quarter of 2016 for 2017. It was an impossible task. So,
Not even a clean quarter.
yeah, it was the middle of a quarter. Anyway, it was just really, really tough the way it was rolled out. Okay. Oh, we did, with the help of IT, move the previous HRIS data into the county system, which saved us, $10,000 a year in storage fees because we were having to pay them just to store our data. Payroll, they've completed 35,000 payroll processes. That means that everyone gets paid every 2 weeks. One of the things I really wanted to work on when I came here is having someone who could actually back up payroll. Believe it or not, we've had one person always in charge of all of our payroll. Made me super nervous. Now, we have an excellent payroll person. She does an amazing job, but something critical like that the whole county relies on every week without a backup, crazy. So we now have someone who's fully trained to back up payroll, and that helps me sleep at night. Of course, when we started with the COVID, and IT was very helpful with this, we immediately, the first thing was payroll's got to keep happening. So we transitioned that to remote work, and there was not a hitch. It worked great. There was a complete rebuild of the time tracking module, as you recall, and that was received very favorably amongst the employees. There was a lot of asks, a lot of issues with it. Again, the way it was rolled out back in 2017, we were able to fix a lot of the problems and allow some flexibility for employees. And again, just back to the error-free process in 2019 and 2020, all required, taxes and reporting has been on time and accurate. Because we have to pay, quarterly taxes, and they have to be accurate. We don't have to pay Social Security, though. Benefits also been super busy. Some of our goals were keep costs down, improve customer service, increase workday utilization, and vendor accounts balanced. We have a lot of vendor accounts. We have a lot of vendor accounts we have to pay every month that is the source of our benefits, and we have to make sure that those essentially balance to zero every month. It's very challenging because of the changes in staff and employees hiring and terminating. So we have a process in place now. We have a excellent analyst and team that's taking care of that. And so we weren't having that before. I can just say, when I started here, these accounts were off by hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so they are balancing to zero, and that's exactly where they should be. We've prepared for open enrollment and our virtual fair for benefits. Unfortunately, we won't have a live benefits fair, but we're setting that up. What is the date of that, Brandon? 27th? 26th. Okay, so we'll be sending out information on that. There'll be an opportunity for employees to log in to Zoom and see and ask questions about their benefits. A lot of, it's interesting when COVID came out, we knew that the emergency, paid sick leave requirements from FFCRA were going to be an issue. We also rolled out some county, provided benefits to law enforcement and to healthcare workers because they were excluded from the original FFCRA. In that meantime, we processed 110, requests for this sick leave. And I can tell you overall, our employees are very grateful that this is in place and that they have this, because even though it's funny, it started out very slow. We had very little impact in the county. We were having maybe 1 or 2 a week. In the last few weeks, it's been go time. We've had 5 a day, every day, where employees are either infected or they are living with someone who's infected. So there's definitely a big change, and we're seeing more and more of this. Matter of fact, we're having cases where employees are actually running out of sick leave. So just something to think about. This is a very, very busy part of what's going on in the benefits office. Doing a lot of employee orientations with all this hiring, processing all the events for benefits to over 2,500, and of course we're all familiar with some of the enhancements that were recently approved by the commission to improve our leave, our dental plan, and our medical plan. So, okay, any questions? Employee engagement, again, is one of our core, cornerstones of how we measure the effectiveness of some of the things we're putting in place in the process to improve, the culture. I thought it was interesting. These are the top 6 and the lowest 6. Top 6 are really favorable about our managers, our immediate supervisors, which I actually was surprised, and I'm not surprised because of Utah County. I'm surprised because everywhere else I've worked, this is not the case. So immediate supervisors are overall doing a really good job of at least having a relationship with their employees, which, as we all know, employees tend to, quit their supervisor, not their job. So that's a super important, connection. It was unfortunate to see that, benefits and pay and some of the other leadership levels were seen as lowest scored on the engagement survey. It shows me that our office needs to do more work on communicating the value of our total compensation plan, because it's a good plan. It's not something that people should be saying, this is weak, we're gonna leave because of that. Because, anyway, I could go on and on about that. But our first survey was super strong. We had 80, percent engagement, of the respondents, of the employees responded, and the mean score was, 3.6, which is good, which is good. So, one of the asks for 2021 is just to continue on with the software that allows us to, conduct this survey. I think it's only 14 grand, but we'd like to be able to keep doing this. It really is a cornerstone of a lot of the things we're trying to put in place. Yeah, performance management, again, this is something we have put a high priority on. A lot of it is about, training supervisors. We have a new online appraisal that we're rolling out slower than I'd hoped, but it's been hard because of COVID and other reasons. But primarily, it's based on goals. Setting goals and your department being able to say, you are supporting what I'm trying to accomplish this year. You have or have not. You may or may not get an increase based upon whether you've supported my goals and my objectives. So in the past, that wasn't the case with the appraisal, and this really is super weighted towards achievement of goals. So I think hopefully that's gonna make in online or overall, performance. The other thing that I've tried to build up and support is a recognition, program. We've done some experiments with Snappy Gift, which in some departments has worked great. Other departments haven't embraced it so much. I would like to see more ways to recognize employees. Again, it's the other side of the coin where we're holding employees accountable, but we also really want to be able to reward those employees who are critical superstars, who really make a difference to the organization. Okay, any questions on that? We have conducted 3 supervisor trainings so far. The items we focus on, of course, harassment, conduct and performance, workers' comp, FMLA leadership. We want to expand this. We would like to make it sort of an academy where new supervisors have to go through at least a minimum amount of training. Again, this really hasn't been done in the past. Surveys I sent out have essentially said, our surveys had no training. They essentially went from an individual contributor to a supervisor, and they just had to learn on the job. So we really want to help the success of this. We really do believe that this will help the success of the county. It'll reduce, turnover, improve engagement. This is really key, that we're getting supervisors trained effectively. And we did, I think I mentioned earlier, we did have a fair amount of investigations this year. We've had some conduct issues, but we've been able to resolve those. We've been able to update about half the policies. The goal, of course, is to get through all of them. We started with the hardest ones, so I do see this accelerating over the rest of this year. And I mean, they really all need to be updated. If you've looked at how they used to be and how they look now, I think you'll see a significant improvement in the format and the content. Last but not least, Relias was one of our requests for this year. It's just rolling out now. I feel very passionate that this is super important, again, to the success. It kind of falls into the training and compliance side of the operation, and the fact that we had nothing like this in the past to track, assign, and keep employees up to date on training. And it goes hand in hand with live training as well. It doesn't eliminate live training, but it does save a lot of cost because most of the training can be done in the system. Just real quick on Relias, again, just rolling out. I really want you to look at the content examples at the bottom. Just think, this is just a snapshot of things that could and should be included, and employees should be trained on a regular basis. We have a fair amount of risk and liability not having trained on these in a regular basis. As a matter of fact, the average cost to defend a harassment lawsuit is over $250,000, and we have been poor at being, and that's just harassment. There's all these other things that represent risk in the county that employees either haven't been trained on or there's no record of them being trained on it. So I think Relias will easily pay for itself. Not that much money, but I think it's critical. And I hope we can all embrace it and utilize it. If some of the departments really utilize its full capability, they will be amazed at what it could do. Any questions? Just a quick snapshot of a survey we did on the supervisor training we did this year so far. I just asked the question, was it useful? Did it help you? And very strongly, yes, was the answer. And And the feedback was, thank you for finally doing this. Let's do more of them. I really appreciated it. So this is the common theme. Really, our supervisors are craving this type of support and training. They want to do a good job. They want to have the tools. And they're free to reach out to us at any time to help have us help them through these performance management issues, but it's great for them to already have it kind of in their toolbox. Workday. So Workday got a little bit of a bad rap in the beginning. I can tell you that it's a state-of-the-art application. BYU's using it, LDS Church, IHC. I mean, it's not a average application. This is a significant high-level program that if we fully utilize will really continue to help us manage our people and help them be more efficient. Again, in our office, further utilization of Workday is helping us do more with less staff. And I think that it can help all the departments. We're having almost 38,000 logins now, which is good. That's just one measure of utilization. That's gone up a bit. And we did do an RFP for the consultant that we use for Workday, which came in at about $18,000 less than the current one that we've been using. And then the last piece of this puzzle is that we are very much wanting to transition from an external consultant to an internal consultant. Patrick and I have talked about this quite a bit with Questica coming on board, and the need to. We have a list of projects that's massive, which I'll show you in a second. The auditor has a list of projects. A company, organization this side usually has 2 full-time support for something like Workday for an HRIS. We have nobody. We do use outside work, and they've been okay. So what we're hoping to do, again, we just signed up with another HR consultant. We want to transition out of them because they would still be necessary to do really big, high-level projects, but the internal support from the IT department would slowly increase at the same time. So I can see in the next couple of years being able to eliminate the outside consultant completely. That's kind of the goal there. Any questions? You can't see this, but this is just gives you an idea of the projects that are on queue for 2021 in Workday. And again, this is just to continue to tweak and make Workday better, more effective, more utilization easy for our employees and our managers. There's functionality we're not using. We just started using, the appraisal, functionality. There's other things like that we could utilize more. So very excited about being able to fully utilize it. We do have a survey that goes out when someone quits, and we ask them, how was your experience with HR services? We are a solid good, and I think we're excellent. So I want to get more detailed information on this. I think there's more we can do to increase that score. We intend to ask more of these questions going into next year, but I'm happy with good, but I do want closer to excellent. These are the goals for, at least a summary of the goals for 2021. They primarily revolve around employee engagement, continually reducing turnover. We want to create a more useful HR site. Our HR site's a little clunky. Not the fault of IT at all. It's something we just haven't been able to focus on. Supervisor leadership, development, again, needs to stay in the forefront and needs to keep happening. Countywide training complete or compliance, and this has to do with Relias. We'll start sending out countywide, courses soon, within the next couple of weeks, and you'll see. And some of those have to be done by elected officials as well, especially the fraud and the ethics, courses. Those are required by the state auditor. So, just a heads up for elected officials. Really want to help our employees understand the value of their total compensation plan. This is a measure that, again, I've explained in the past, it hasn't been that high. They need to understand that we really do have a really good, solid total comp plan. Completing our comp studies, 100% goal-based appraisals. We got about half the county on that system now. We just need to finish the other half. Like to see the ability for department heads to have a little bit of discretion in recognizing their really high performers. And for our department, I need to maintain the level of efficiency we've achieved, get all our policies update, compliance training complete. This rolls into Relias, and our internal workday support functioning, at least to a certain extent, in 2021. Any questions about those goals?
I do have some questions. But are you done with this as part of your presentation?
I am.
Okay. I mean, at first, I want to just note, you mentioned a couple of these items, but I think they're worth highlighting. A couple major projects where your expertise was needed tremendously, and of your whole team, was that DDAP merger with Wasatch Mental Health. It was probably the most significant HR event that we've had. And you were a very value-added consultant throughout that process. So really appreciated that. And then same thing, like you were saying, you started talking about how your department was managing a lot of these COVID-related leave, but we know that as we all dealt with COVID-19, you were kind of have to interpret brand new federal statutes and implement some of those benefits into our county policies to take care of our county employees. So really appreciate all of that effort. One bit of feedback on the goals. I also think this presentation has been really helpful in terms of the annual report and the overview of what your department's doing, and you're taking the department in the right direction. I think, and here you do have on the metric on the far right, something that's measurable. And I think that that's what we're getting at. I think Rudy would probably agree. For those who don't know, Rudy's our new budget manager. And that's some feedback that we've been trying to get. This is really the second year where we're trying to reinforce this. And measurability is a key factor, maybe not in every goal or outcome, but at least in a majority. So you have some of those, but I would push you a little bit to pick a level of attainment. So not, right, because here, what would be hard is it's hard to say in next year's presentation, what level were you shooting for on any of these ones that you have a percent or a number next to.
That's really good. Excellent feedback.
And so if we could, before the end of the year, maybe we can pick numbers, and then that year, now we know what you're shooting for when you give next year's report.
That's great. Excellent feedback. Thank you. Yeah, we'll absolutely do that. And these are things we are actually right now measuring. So it should be easy to, relatively easy to come up with a goal, actual target number.
Great.
Good.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Okay, ready to transition to 2021 total compensation observations and recommendations. So just a really high level, this is how Utah County total comp works, or looks, if you take the whole pie. Here's total comp. 36% of it is benefits, 64% of it is wages. That equates to 38 million in benefits, 69 million in wages. So now if you ask how much it costs per dollar to administer our benefits, it's about 50%. But this is the pie. This is the elements of the pie of total compensation. We base our concepts of total compensation on the employee value proposition. Of course, compensation and benefits are important, pieces. They'd be in the bottom of the hierarchy of needs. They fulfill safety and those things that employees feel like they need to have. But really, it's these other pieces that are harder to get that really make a difference in whether people want to work here and stay here. Do they have opportunity? Do they have important work, meaningful work? Do they have work content? Do they have affiliation with their peers? Those are the things I think the county is lacking on, although, like I said, some of the survey responses showed otherwise, but I think we can improve on this overall. Because of the...
Can I ask you about that?
Oh, of course.
Because I know you, I mean, we can always do better, and I know you're going to try to do better in terms of your department, but human resources is not really creating the employee value proposition, right? Or how would you say, because the department head is making personnel decisions and has the day-to-day management
Yes.
and what those maybe advancement opportunities, I mean, you can be a partner,
Yes.
but I mean, do you see the role differently, or how do you think about this?
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. So I see, of course, the comp and benefits side, which we do create. I see the other parts as we can help with the culture by training and asking the questions and finding out what employees really need and want. So we can provide the tools and the data, but you're right, at the end of the day, it's the immediate supervisors and the departments who really make the difference, especially on the intrinsic side of the equation. So that, hopefully that answered your question. I do think they're all critically important. I do think the three on the right tend to get, neglected from time to time. Your average employee really focuses on comp, right? How much do I make per hour? And in the reality in the public sector, we're going to make less. And there's valid reasons for that. Benefits really are more expensive in the public sector. That's one of the reasons. There's a fair amount of job security. That's a factor. But we also need to have a place to work where meaningful work. We like our boss. We feel like we're doing something important. So that, again, I agree with you. We're here, I think, from HR to help create the environment and provide tools. But at the end of the day, it does fall upon management.
And because I think we all know that sometimes there's a difference in the morale and some of these other components of job satisfaction based on the department.
Right.
So just as we're talking, I'm wondering one thing, because you can only help to the extent people solicit and take the feedback and the tools that you have available. I wonder if it wouldn't be helpful, because you are one of the most consistent themes in our department head meeting, because a lot of it is personnel issues and HR training issues. One of those things could be that if you see outliers in the good or the bad direction, we have these dashboards or this data to show, and maybe that helps each department to realize, hey, actually, you said that these job satisfaction criteria can actually help. Well, look, this department actually has way lower attrition or has a way higher employee engagement survey. So it's actually working. Maybe we should pay attention to some of these tools.
We can do that. We can. And it is super effective. It will, and I'm happy to do it. I really enjoy that, actually. So
Great.
I can make that a focus in 2021. Some of it's uncomfortable, though. So it's all about the talent. I tell our talent management team this all the time. We don't just want to hire people to fill seats. We want to hire quality. I mean, we all know as managers and leaders that we would take one quality applicant over 5 non-quality applicants. So it makes all the difference in the success of the county going forward, and the efficiency and the creativity. Jim Collins, good to great author. I always say it's about the people, but it's really about the right people. We do need to start focusing more on getting the right person. If you have to turn down 100 applicants to get the right applicant, it's worth it every time. So, and the employee value proposition is an important part of this, because the right people generally demand more. So just real quick, as we look at the market and pay, we're focusing on the cost of labor, not the cost of living. Historically, the county is focused more on the cost of living. As a matter of fact, the public sector more focuses on the cost of living. I can tell you overall the cost of living tends to lead the cost of labor a little bit, not so much in Utah County, but across the nation, the cost of labor tends to be higher. The cost of living. I always say we're not competing for, a dozen eggs, we're competing for labor. And while we care about what the cost of living is it really our responsibility to keep an employee's standard of living at a certain level? Really, it's, I think, our job to compete in the labor market and get the best candidates for what the market supports. So that's really our approach. And I'm not saying we never look at the cost of living. We do. It is a factor. It's important. But really, what the market says about what does it cost to hire this job is what we should be focusing on when we look at pay structures. We do identify, as we go out to the market, we do identify what is the median market for that job and what is the structure. And we want to compare that with what's happening in Utah County. Our philosophy, so usually with comp, companies will either say we're going to lag the market, we're going to meet the market, or we're going to exceed the market. That's their philosophy for pay. Quite honestly, it's lagged the market here in Utah County, and that's okay. And the reason that's okay, there's actually a variety of reasons, but leading the market, especially with all the uncertainty, is a super high risk. The other thing is there's a significant amount of increase to change a structure. So to change a structure, you need to have a significant amount of market lag to, to justify it. So I'm not gonna say that this job is 1% under market, therefore we need to increase the grade. That's never gonna happen. We need to, on an average, slightly lag the market as a county. That's my opinion, and not try to match the market exactly. I think that serves us over time much better and saves costs. Some of the other reasons that we may recommend an adjustment is if there's an internal issue with, compression. I'm sure you guys have heard this. There's several jobs in the county where someone's going from hourly to salary where they make less money. That's a problem, because it's a leadership role and they actually take a step back in pay, so we need to address some of those. Occasionally when we do an FLSA analysis, that is, are they exempt or not exempt, we find that if we move them to exempt, we need to increase their grade because overtime issues and just the fact that it's now an administrative exemption and it requires a higher level of pay. And we also do rely on, we do a point factoring evaluation of every job in the county. And what this is it's ranking the jobs by the requirements, the qualifications, the education, the skills, the hazards, and we come up with a point value. And all of our jobs are already ranked. We've done that this year. And what that does, that helps us identify jobs that we either don't have a match in the market or it's just not fitting the way it should. We can go back to this value and say, well, this is the value we would recommend, based upon that value. So what I'm saying here is it's a multi-step process to try to get the best recommendation and the most fair recommendation for our jobs.
And just one question, how do you define the market, that we're pegging to or lagging off of?
Great question.
Right, because obviously, I think compared to the private sector, I think our retirement and benefits are significantly superior.
Mhm.
But our cash comp is lower in many cases. And then, but perhaps if you're comparing the market to other government agencies, then the benefits are also more comparable. How do you define the market?
Great question. There's no doubt that the market is other, public entities in the URS system. That is the market. And so if we are able to find the same job in the comparably sized, counties or, entities, we're able to really come up with a pretty accurate market rate for what that job should be. We do have to bring in, the private sector occasionally when there's a lack of comparable data, but we weight that down. We have to weight it down because it's really not comparable, Now, you can make the case for IT. IT is unique in this market because of Silicon Slopes. We do have to consider sort of a market adjustment for some of the IT positions, but they still have IT jobs in Salt Lake County. So we're always going to start with those comparables that really are matches and try to stick with that. And if we ever went outside of that, we would explain it. So, excellent question. Just for fun, I made an assumption back in 2010 that everything was even, and I took the comparative, growth of $1. If you look at the yellow line, that's the actual, pay actions of Utah County over the last, 10 years. So you can see that didn't keep up. The blue line is the average of other local government in the state. So other local governments done a little bit more effective job of trying to keep up with the cost of wages. Statewide, that's all private, public entities, of course higher, that's to be expected. And what doesn't surprise me at all is Utah County as a whole. The county as a whole is leading everything in wage growth. So I'm never gonna say we need to match the state or the county. I'm going to say we should get closer to the other local governments. That's what I will say. And I'll never even say we have to match the other, local governments, but we need to at least be on par, close. So there is, and again, that's an assumption that everything was even in 2010, which is pretty unlikely. So we have, just in a nutshell, Utah County has consistently lagged the market. And again, some of that's okay, but when we get way behind, it does cause a problem because then when we try to make an adjustment, it's $5 million, right? And we don't want to be in that position. We want to do smaller adjustments every year. That's the best way to do comp. Okay, we have laid out the process for market studies for 2020. We've finished the sworn officers in the sheriff's department. We'll now be working on phase 2, which is health department and some of these other departments, larger departments basically. We're trying to affect as many employees as we can as quickly as possible. Also, considering, turnover issues, some of the departments have higher and lower turnover rates. And so ideally, we would be completely finished by the end of May with all the market study. What that means is if we make a recommendation and it was accepted, those implementations would be phased, which actually lowers the cost. So the methodology, of course, as we talked about earlier, because of the pandemic, it doesn't mean we actually have to take action. It's just going to be recommendations based upon this schedule. And again, you can see the sheriff's department represents, 41% of the employees of Utah County. So big chunk there. Again, I like to focus on wage growth estimates. National surveys are expecting about 1.4. Utah as a state is pretty unique. 2.3 is pretty solidly expected as our wage growth estimate for 2021. This comes from Department of Workforce Services and the government's Office on Management and Budget. There also is a index that's put out by the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia for the nation that shows, of course, Utah being the best, being the strongest. And that's the only reason I wanted to show that is I want to just remind us all that even though we're in an uncertain time during a horrible, pandemic, Utah County is super unique. For whatever reason, for many reasons, we are one of, if not the strongest county in the nation. Unemployment in Utah County is actually lower than 4%, which is a normal unemployment rate. The state's 4.1, but Utah County is even lower. So just quickly, this is the map. It does show, Utah County with the, coincident economic activity index as being the very best in the country. This is our unemployment compared to the country. And, this gets into, so anyway, that's the only reason these are in here is to just, and it's something we all know, right? But I just want to remind us that Utah County is unique. It's a time of uncertainty, a time of we don't know what to do necessarily, but I think we should just remember that doing nothing may not be the best choice. This is just an interesting. This kind of goes back to the the ratio of wages to benefits. You can see that Utah County, 36 to 64. Other local government within the state is 37 to 60. Number 3. Thank you. And you can see how private industries, 30%, 28%. So, you ask yourself, well, where's that extra money? Why are we spending more on benefits and less on wages? Well, in a nutshell, it's retirement. If you look at our retirement costs, they are clearly significantly more than the private sector, and it's a significant difference. So we have that, and that's something our employees need to realize. We have a really good benefit that private industry does not have. The private industry average is 5% match on a 401k, and that's it. That's the current average on retirement. Our benefit is 10 to 20%, depending upon which tier you're in. So significant difference. This is the entities we use in our market surveys. Again, you can see that they're pretty much all public entities, if not all public entities. Pay Factors has a survey database, and Western Management Group has a survey database that includes private industries. But again, we weight those down because we really want our public entities to be the primary source. Okay, any questions?
So probably, as always, when you do market surveys like we've done in the past, is total compensation.
Correct. Yeah, we're looking at wages and benefits. Again, the thing that's interesting, if you look, and I've looked at this very closely, if you look at the largest counties in the state, we're pretty much on par. There's not a lot of significant difference between what they offer and what we offer. And again, a lot of that is driven by URS, quite honestly. If you look at the medical, the dental, the life, they're really similar.
Yeah.
They really are similar. And so that's why if you pick these, public entities that are in URS, you got a pretty good market sample. Where it gets risky a little bit is if you try to pull in, private sector who are not spending that much on retirement, you're gonna get some flawed data. So we're very careful about that.
I'll have to say, the presentation with the graphs is a lot better than listening on the phone and just wondering what you're talking about.
Oh, good, yeah. Yeah, I was hoping you'd be here because, the visual's so much better.
Oh, sorry. Closer to the mic.
This may or may not mean anything to you, but if there's many surveys every year that ask, companies and government, what do you plan, to budget for 2021? So this is what's planned on average for, companies across the nation for 2021. 3% is what it came out to. It's clearly gone down because of COVID. Again, it may mean, so I would think this would be useful if we didn't want to do any analysis and we just wanted to say, Rudy, just to be safe, 3%. Just set aside 3% and then we'll work on it. Well, this is a place to start, but we're trying to get more accurate data and give, a better idea of what it probably should be. But I just want to throw that out, that this is just a place to start. This is what companies, and again, here at the county, and it'd be great if we, and I know you're working on this, it'd be great if we had, because this is the way it works everywhere else, private industries, we start with with what we have in revenue. What do we have? And if we have nothing, we have nothing. But if we have something that we can, put towards some salary, structure adjustments, I think we should look at it. And, but that's where it should begin. And I'm uncomfortable just throwing out 3%, and I wouldn't, but, it's a lot easier if we know what to expect, we might be able to utilize. So the first phase of our market study was the sheriff's department. And again, this just kind of gives you a comparison of how it would look, differently between a CPI increase and a targeted market increase. So instead of all 19 positions getting an increase, 6 would be recommended for an increase. We focus first on those jobs with a significant market lag. So we try to use 7% or so. So in other words, let's say you have a list of jobs, 5 of them are 7% under market. Those would be the ones we'd want to make a structure change to. That's a big variance. The other lags, smaller lags, we don't really want to touch those necessarily. We can go farther, but of course it costs more money. The other thing that we look at is, compression, like I mentioned earlier. There is some, compression between the sergeants and lieutenants, which we believe needs to be addressed. Long story short, in the case of the sheriff's office, if you address just the positions who are significantly under market, it's 1.1% of their budget, which is about $280,000. So, which is significantly less than it would be if we did, for example, a COLA. A COLA, you'd be looking at $1 million plus.
So I think I'm understanding your philosophy a little bit more, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if we do this yearly adjustments, which you're kind of leading towards, then the beauty behind it, as I'm hearing you say this, is that it gives us the ability to have more focus and target areas of concern, where COLAs are just a blanket across the board. And the COLAs, when that happens, we could find ourselves out of market in some areas, or over market in some areas, just because you can't give a COLA to half the employees or a certain subset of it.
Right.
So the thought is that you focus in on the areas and then find the areas that are out of market and move them from there.
That's exactly right. And that's become more common as the approach in compensation, where an annual review of every position is done and only adjustments are made to those who are out of market. And you're right, you're exactly right. If you take, the COLA approach, and it's a significant COLA, you're basically making the problems with equity worse because you are, as you said, you're raising jobs who shouldn't be raised, and you may not be raising jobs who really needed to be raised enough. And so, but it really needs to be done on an annual basis. Now, this first rollout with our system that we're using right now, Pay Factors, it's been a lot of work, like tons of work. And so by the end of, or by, the middle of 2021, I do think we'll have the system in place where we'll be able to start doing an annual full county recommendation of all the positions that need to be targeted. This year, like I had mentioned, this has to be done in phases because there's so much work to be done to get it set up. But I do think it will save money. I do think that it really addresses those jobs that we are under market, we have a hard time holding on to and recruiting. Now, with that being said, this time around, and this is something that is unique because we haven't done this before. We went, 2 years with no changes. There's also been 2 years of the highest wage growth in Utah County. So I am recommending a very small, general increase, which we of course say no to make up for the fact that the entire county is significantly lagging the market. So the county as a whole. Can you take that mic from me? So just some things to think about. At a minimum, I would like to be able to go through the county once we establish if there is any funding, what the funding is, and we can go up to that and go as deep as we can with that amount. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when I say deep, we start with those 7% under market and keep going up till we run out of money. And that's a very logical approach to me because we have a fixed amount of money. And if we have less money, then we don't go as far. We just hit the jobs that are the most under market. So that's a way to go about that. So this is just a hypothetical giving you an idea of what it would look like in different scenarios. So option one is we set aside 1.6 for market targeted increases. These are jobs that are significantly under market. We also add on a 1% increase generally, and again, that would address 2 years of 4% wage growth in Utah County. So again, because Utah County, I'm not blaming anybody, but Utah County as a county has had phenomenal wage growth over the last couple of years. And I realize we're in the middle of a pandemic, but the wage growth estimates for Utah County are 2.1 to 2.3 in 2020. So we're still behind. So that's an option. We could look at a combination of market pricing and a general increase.
So on your percentage though, to understand that, the 1 point, tell me how you get to the 1.6, what that number is, because if I see general, I see that as countywide as a
Yes.
1.0. But the 1.6, if it's market pricing, is that 1.6 off of our current salaries and benefits?
Yeah.
Is that with that 1.6?
That's
Okay.
exactly. So those numbers are based on the salary budget, for 2021.
Although it's not overall, it
No,
is targeted.
it's phased.
But it's still the 1.6 of the
Correct.
total. Okay.
It's phased and targeted. So that's why the number 1.6 is considerably less than what our salary budget actually is. I mean, it's less than if you just times 1.6 by the salary budget because it would be implemented in 3 phases and only, targeting those jobs. And again, the way I foresee this working is we would spend the 1.6 until it was gone. And if we weren't able to hit everyone, then we were not able to hit everyone who's under market. We would.
So I got to challenge you on this a little bit then.
Yeah.
If the 1.6 gets the county back up to market prices,
Well, it won't get the county because there'll still be a fair amount of jobs that are in between 1% and 6% under market. We're not going to touch those.
okay.
We're not hitting every job under market. It's the jobs that are the most under market, generally 7 to 10.
So why would we
percent.
not then on the general increase, take some away from that and increase it onto the market price,
Yeah.
the market structure?
I actually thought about that. There is a way to do that. It gets kind of complex. You could do that though. You could you could say, we could then use the general increase just for those who aren't getting a market increase and do a mathematical calculation on where that could fall. And that would actually lower that number. Because the way I did the math on here is the 1% is everyone on January 1st, 1% more. And then the 1.6 would be in 3 phases. January,
Got it.
April, June.
Okay.
And, you know, like I said, these are just hypotheticals. They are, I just want to get you guys some ideas. If, let's say hypothetically, we have that much money, this is what we could do with it. And we can change those around. What I don't want to see is us not do market pricing. I really, in every scenario, in my opinion, we need to do market pricing to at least make sure we're not making the variations in our pay worse within groups of employees. So hopefully that makes sense. You know, option 2 is just a variation down, and then the very lowest variation, which I would hope would be the very, the way we at least do this, would be 1% market pricing, which would be just a little more than $500,000. So that's significantly less money, which I know is a factor, but it would at least address those jobs the most under market and get us in place. So again, I didn't want this to be, you know, confusing, but I just wanted to throw some numbers so you could kind of see what we're talking about. Now, as you recall, just for comparison, if we did a market, you know, study every 3 to 5 years, you're looking at $4 to $5 million, right? And we're trying to really control that and get that down and make it incremental. And so I think as we get this system in place more effective, we will see more, you know, cost-effective usage of our dollars. So, okay, any questions?
So I gotta ask you a question then, when it comes to those who are at the top of their scale. Their only increase after that is this general increase.
Or if their job is deemed in the marketplace to be significantly under market, they could get an increase that way.
So they could still fit into that market pricing then.
They could. Now, if we got away, you know, from COLAs completely, and someone who's at the top, for whatever reason, their, you know, job was not increasing in the market, they would never get an increase. So that would be super unpopular, but it's something that could happen.
Ralph, do we have a good way of tracking on all of our employees where people are currently at in terms of their manager review or their performance
We
review?
do.
I mean, this is another way of, I'm curious, it would probably be complicated to administer, but I do think there are situations where folks should be carved out of these. I mean, if you have someone who's on a performance plan, I do not understand why they would be included in a market-based increase, right? And you and I have talked about this, that I understand that it's good HR practice to evaluate the position, and it's also more practical to do that. But I think there also has to be a view in some way on who's in that position. And so that may be complicated, and that's why we have you with your technical expertise to help us manage through these questions. But it does seem, and as a taxpayer, I think I would be frustrated to hear that someone who's on a performance plan, that someone who, if a manager prefers, yes, this person should not be working here anymore, is participating in this increase. So,
Yeah, it is very tricky. You bring up a good point. So theoretically, the merit increase should address that, right? Because merit's about performance. It's supposed to be tied to performance. And again, we could do more with merit increases. We could make our merit increases even more performance-based. And that really, when you look at the jobs themselves, you really should try to just, you know, stick with the market and not think about the person at all. However, we could create a policy where you will be, you know, delayed on your market increase until you're out of, you know, performance improvement. I mean, we could absolutely do that. So there are ways to, you know, penalize basically those who are not, you know, performing, which I think is fine. I mean, it wouldn't be the practice because you're really saying this person, even though everyone in this job is going to get an increase because they're under market, this person is not, because they're not, performing. And again, we can do that. We just need to be careful. We just need to make sure we have really solid way to articulate why it is they're not getting an increase. But it absolutely could be done, and that would say a lot. That would be I think that would be an effective tool to help support that. So it's a good point.
I mean, that's the one point I have. The other point is just, I appreciate all the effort you've done to get to this point and develop it. So there's those very unique situations, and then there's a couple of groups, I think, of employees that you may have a particular view on. I'm not gonna walk through any of them at the moment, but where you've been working on an ongoing issue, maybe for a couple of years, where there's some weird element to the pay arrangement, right? For example, we talked about the compression issue. Someone who's part-time and you're trying to work on with the department to say, hey, you have part-time folks that really should be, but they're working so many hours, they really should be in a full-time situation. And you're already trying to work to address some of like a total compensation issue with the department. I would hate for these conversations to kind of take away from those efforts that are already ongoing.
I could see it conflicting. I still think we could do it, though.
And I don't necessarily think I just think we need to be mindful
Yeah,
of a few of those ongoing projects as you roll something like this out
Yeah.
and figure out how it applies.
and really, the compression issues are sometimes the very hardest because it creates this domino effect, and we don't want to change all these other jobs, But anyway, it gets to be very complex. Yeah.
But overall, though, that's why I kind of lend to this market pricing theory, because if you do the general increase, that's a COLA. I mean, it doesn't matter if they're in performance measures or anything like that. They're going to get it. It's just a given that they're going to. Everyone gets it. But with the market pricing, the market there, the merit step increases are affected by your performance.
That's
And
correct.
so when we're talking about we're talking about a band, and we're looking at jobs in a total and not necessarily individuals within it. And so if the whole thing jumps up a little bit, they're still in this band of their pricing. And if they don't get the merit step, then they just stay where they're at.
Right.
So that's the way. But again, going back to that general increase, that's where I think it gets problematic, because everyone gets that.
Yeah, and I'm on board with that. And the only reason I factor that in again is because 2 years of nothing while we had really high wage growth in Utah County. That's the only reason. I know that we're falling farther and farther away, and we can fix it over time. But just going back to this guy here, this is what we're looking at. Utah County's yellow. Utah County government is yellow. Utah County, geographically is gray. And then we have local government as blue, and the state as a whole is orange. So you can see that even with our attempts to keep up with the CPI, we have consistently lagged the market. And again, I never intend to match the market. I don't, but I just like to see us follow that arc a little closer.
And this is wage.
This is wage growth.
But
With-
where's the combination of both?
So I'm getting away from CPI, completely, but the CPI is down to 1.9 right now, just so you know.
Yeah.
Now, again, CPI is a factor. It's just, when it comes to wage recommendations, I do want my focus to be wage growth, which is market-based pricing. That's exactly what it is. It's market-based pricing. It's not recommending an increase to maintain someone's individual standard of living. It's to recommend a wage growth to make us competitive in the labor market, which, again, like I mentioned earlier, CPI generally runs higher overall in the country than wage growth, because it's about eggs and gasoline and houses.
Right.
So
But the offset we have with the other chart that you had was our benefits are rich,
there,
and they're richer than some of the others that we're talking
They are.
about here, which will make up some of that curve.
absolutely. That's why, the blue curve is probably the one that's the most applicable, because that's the other local government in Utah.
Yeah.
So again, I don't ever want to see us at that line, but I'd like to see us following it and a little closer. That's why I thought maybe the 1% would be a good idea this year, because you can see at the end there, 2019-20, we're just flat.
Yeah.
And so that gap got big. If we do 1%, general now, it'll help us next year make our market increase more effective and not do that. So that's really why I threw that in.
Where would the 1% put us?
It would put us about halfway between, maybe a quarter up.
Blue.
Yeah, it wouldn't. I mean, we would not reach the blue by any means, but it would make up some of that ground. Okay, talked about that. This. Okay, so this is just a graph that shows elected officials compared to the elected official market in the state of Utah amongst similar counties, the largest counties, basically. You can see that back in 2016 and 17, we were dead on. Something happened where an increase got the county dead on. Since that time, it's been fixed. And I realize there's a lot of issues surrounding this. I get it. I know that an elected official runs, based upon a salary. They should expect to get that salary. I also understand there's, the public service motivator, and that, they're not in it for the money necessarily, but I do think we should at least look at what would be fair pay for an elected official. And I've made some recommendations. I'm going to give those to you in a written form. Of course, nothing has to be done with this at all. It's really just to raise the issue, for conversation, that our elected officials are currently less than what's out in the marketplace. So, and it's not like a regular job, right? You don't have to have any qualifications. You don't have to meet a certain level of anything.
But to be clear, when you have your orange line is other elected in
That's
local
correct.
and state entities. This is not just a standard wage growth.
Correct. This is other elected officials in the state of Utah. So, yeah, I know I fully understand the issues surrounding this. When you look at our county and you look at all the wages of the department heads and the other employees, our elected officials just keep falling. And maybe that's what we want. I don't know. But to me, when I look at that and I look at the ranking, it kind of makes me cringe, quite honestly, as an outsider looking in, because I have no agenda here. It makes me a little uncomfortable, just thinking about compensation only. So my recommendation is something needs to be done. And it can be done in 2021, but I just think it needs to be looked at. And I do have, like I said, additional data that I'll share. So yeah, just in a nutshell, the market does support an increase. I'd like to see the ratio of our jobs stay similar to the market. In other words, if a sheriff makes this and a commissioner makes this, and there's a ratio here, I'd kind of like to see that close to what the market shows. We should just at least consider something. Any thoughts or questions?
I mean, one question or one comment, I think, for the other departments, I think that those who were on the ballot this year, they decided to run, and so I think that they're kind of pegged in, and they know what to expect. And so I don't think that maybe reviewing those positions makes sense, but maybe there's a rolling way to look at these for maybe those who are not up for election this year, and then you can look at these ones at another point in time. So that there's kind of like what you're doing with departments, rolling a review. Just one thought on that.
No, I think that makes sense, because like you said, if they're already running, they are running on an expected salary. And it might make sense. One option, and I put this in my paper, is to look at those individual roles that really are the farthest off. and maybe look at those first, maybe a couple of those that just need to be hit. And then in our next election, be ready to actually make a recommendation prior to those individuals running. It's just some thoughts. And again,
I'm glad to hear that thought, because Ralph and I have had conversations on this, and they were very similar.
yeah,
They were that, you know, people have, and it's not like there was a lack of individuals necessarily that want to come in at the salary levels that are there, or do public service to a certain extent. So, and I don't know how you balance that, and I understand from our conversation it's tricky. But if you could somehow separate it, because it would be nice to change before an election, or at least have the option of a change before the election, so that the individuals, you know, they're there currently, or they're running.
well before the candidate filing period.
Well before, there's at least a signal that's there, so that there's an understanding, and then going through that process, if it comes up in conversation, it can be talked about, you know, with the constituents out there, so there's an understanding that this is kind of heading this direction. And, you know, are you for it or against it, or whatever the case may be with that. And that would lend for an easier transition for us as the commission too, to say, you know, this has been a conversation that we've had for a long period of time, even with the constituents that are out there.
right. No, I think that's really solid approach, actually, and I don't think anyone could argue with you on that one. And nothing, you know, nothing has to be done right now. Like I said, there is one or two of our elected officials that are more off than others, and if we were gonna do a little bit, and not everyone, we could look at those, but those who are running and haven't actually started running yet is really a solid, logical argument. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Okay, I'm almost done. I'm gonna call in 5 minutes. So, benefits. So great news. Select Health Share continues to maintain the 2% increase. And I gotta tell you, I know sometimes there's some naysayers about Select Health Share, but I've been in benefits for a long time, and it is generally 7 to 10 to 12% a year increase in the cost of benefits to companies. 2% is nothing, and the service is good. Now, I realize there's employees who are frustrated with not having their, you know, doctor on a panel, but for the county and for the employees as a whole, this is good. I promise this is a good thing. If we weren't in Select Health Share, I would venture to say that our employees would have to start paying a premium.
Yeah, I totally agree. And when this first came up, it was cloudy to look into that future. I mean, I was nervous. I was nervous about it. It almost looked like it was a certain promise that was too good to be true. I mean, there was a lot of times I looked at it and thought, we're taking a chance here. But when I saw that we were 7 to 15% possible increases, we said, I remember thinking, okay, well, we got to take a chance with this and see if it'll work. So I'm very pleased that it's panning out, and because we were the flagship,
Yeah.
and I don't know if we still are or not, but we were the flagship for this to start this off, and so I think it's been fantastic.
Yeah, yes, from an HR standpoint and having worked with a lot of benefits plan, it is great. It really is. And I realize not everyone agrees with me, but it is, you can't do better. You really can't, because it's a good system. I mean, Select Health, right? It's a great system. And we get the services we need, and we're having very small increases. So it's good. It really is good for the county. You know, dental rates, you know, stay the same. Matter of fact, we have a little bit of, you know, surplus in our reserve because of COVID, but that's good because we enhanced our benefits. We added, you know, implants, and we raised the max, you know, to 2,000 in 2020, and we didn't even spend what we expected to spend. So we're in a good place. I don't see those rates going up for a couple of years.
You know, and personally for me on that, I had to find my way on that. I started with I think it was the gold. Is that right? Gold.
You want to do the
That was
platinum.
terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, that didn't work very well. So we had to move the other one. Now I'm happy with.
I'll just say right now, if any employees are watching, you wanna do the platinum plan.
Yeah.
It's worth a couple extra bucks.
Right.
And there's no change to the rates on the voluntary plans. For those employees who haven't had a chance to look at the Voya plans, they really are good plans. They're inexpensive, and if you have any accidents with you or your children, you have to stay in the hospital overnight, heaven forbid you get an illness that's, critical, they pay quick, they pay good, there's a wellness incentive. It really is a good voluntary plan. Short-term disability, still the same. Those rates are not going up. There is a problem, however. Long-term disability, right. So, long-term disability, our vendor is Mutual of Omaha, and apparently, we have some really expensive ongoing claims with Mutual of Omaha. We have employees on long-term disability who have expensive claims that will be on long-term till they're 65, and they're in their 40s. So, their actuaries came up with a premium increase of $266,000, or almost double the premium for LTD. Yikes, right? And, we had talked once about, does it make sense to make this a self-funded plan? And really the answer is no. And the reason why is you have to set aside significant reserves for a self-funded LTD plan. And then you have this massive risk of getting stuck into what happened to Mutual of Omaha, where you're stuck on the hook for someone for 25 years paying their salary. And our population here is mature. We're wise. So, there's probably more risk for Utah County to have expensive LTD claims than other organizations. And so, as we talk through the scenarios, self-funding is massive risk. So, and again, this is the risk we would be faced with. We would be paying that increase. And so, Gallagher did a phenomenal job of going out to market. They found a great, company, the Standard, and it's great that we can do this, that we can just basically say, see ya, and sign up with another
Can
company.
we just switch to them? Was
We
that
just switched the short term.
short term?
Yeah, we already had them before, but we added short term last year. Yeah, 3 years on mutual, we just added the short term. So anyway, long story short, Gallagher went out to the market. They found a great, strong, company that would match all of our rates, our life rates. They did have to show a increase on the LTD, but it's only $52,000 a year instead of $266,000 a year. And they also give us a $24,000, tech credit annually. So the net increase is about $27,000 a year, which is, from my point of view, phenomenal, because it's a great company with a great plan. The other thing they're including in this, which is something that's come up over the years, or at least the years I've been here, is increasing the accidental death payout for public safety officer from 40 to 80,000. And that's only an additional $175 a month for everyone. That's the total extra premium. So that's been, we don't have to do that piece, but it's so inexpensive, and it's something that we've talked about.
Everyone in the county? 175 for everyone in the county?
Just all the public safety officers.
Oh, just the
This is
public
limited to public safety, but 175 a month for all the public safety for accidental death, that's super cheap.
Yeah.
So my opinion, I don't know why we wouldn't do that. I think it's a nice little extra something for these employees that are putting their lives at risk. And so from my point of view, it's not even an option. We need to go with the Standard. There will be essentially a $27,000 a year increase in premium. There is some surplus of reserves and that we could utilize if we needed to offset some of that. I'd like to get away from that if we can, but anyway, this kind of is the bottom line on the health plans, is no changes, no increases except this one. Thoughts? And just one more thing, all the other counties offer a fully paid LTD plan. So if we pulled out of an LTD funded by the county, we would definitely be an outlier.
So the 25% increase that you're talking about on the premiums, if it was applied back to the Mutual of Omaha, would that change would that change their pricing?
No, no, they gave us our final and best considering all the competitors, and they really feel like they are on the hook for massive liability. Well, going forward, they really, they just don't see it feasible to stay with the county with the claims they have currently. So,
How can the standard do it then?
that's a great question. Well, they want our business. They did, anything you want to add there, Brandon?
Clean slate.
Yeah, clean slate. I think they're hoping that, I guess they're just hoping that we won't have these massive claims we just had. And, I mean, they use actuarial data to make this decision. So they analyze all of our employees' ages and everything, and this is what they came up with as a fair rate. I mean, it is more than we got originally, from Mutual of Omaha, because Mutual of Omaha, I think, was really, trying to buy the business, and to a certain extent, I think the standard's probably charging what really is a fair premium that will not result in this problem. Of course, you can't, predict the future, but I feel more comfortable with this proposal. I think it'll stay in place.
What does our history show us in the way of?
History shows us that our LTD claims are increasing and the severity of them are increasing. And they would have taken that into consideration with these rates. But there's also probably an expectation that that will not continue. I mean, it's got to level out at some point. And so they're probably hoping to ride that level out period, that plateau.
How long do they hold their rates? It's just 1 year?
No, 3 years.
3 years?
Yep. So it could be really great. I mean, worst case scenario, we change again, but this is a fair amount of work too, for Brandon to change this right now, right before open enrollment. But he says he can do it. He's on it.
Okay.
So, but I really think this is really, I don't think we even have an option here. We can't do $266,000 increase in premium. So. Okay, I think I have one more slide. Oh, just the bottom line. Just if, if it was a perfect world, I'd recommend allocating up to, 2.6% additional wage funding for pay adjustments in 2021. And then change our life and disability carrier from Mutual Omaha to the standard. Okay, that's it. Any questions overall?
No, thank you.
Yeah, I have a handout.
Thanks, Ralph. Really, really great information. Appreciate the improvements from your office. They've been phenomenal since your hire. I can't even begin to tell you how much I appreciate you. You do a phenomenal job.
Thanks, Nathan.